All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into a really influential book, J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. And this thing is, well, it's part incredible personal story and part deep dive cultural analysis. So right from the get-go, you know this isn't your average memoir. The book opens with this dedication. For Mamaw and Papaw, my very own hillbilly terminators. I mean, come on, that tells you everything, right? This isn't just a story about success. It's a story about survival and the, let's say, unconventional people who made sure it happened. And that dedication really sets up the central question of the whole book. How in the world does a kid from the Rust Belt end up at Yale Law School? It seems almost impossible, right? Vance uses his own journey to give us a look inside a part of America that, while a lot of people talk about, but very few actually get. He's taken us on a ride from total chaos to the absolute elite, and believe me, he doesn't skip over any of the bumps.
So to understand how he did it, Vance first has to explain the world he came from. It's a world really defined by two things: a huge migration and a culture that is just full of contradictions.
It all starts with something called the Hillbilly Highway. This wasn't a real road, but it was a very real path for millions of people from Appalachia. His family, like countless others, packed up their lives in Kentucky and headed north to Ohio looking for good factory jobs. But here's the thing, they brought their culture with them. And that created this really unique identity in the Rust Belt, super proud, kind of isolated, and always feeling like they were stuck between two completely different worlds. And that culture had a very specific set of rules, what Vance calls the Hillbilly Code. Now, just look at this list. It's a total paradox, isn't it? On one hand, you've got this incredible loyalty and a belief in hard work. But on the other hand, you have a violent honor code and this deep-seated feeling that, in the end, nothing you do really matters. It preaches loyalty, but it's just one spark away from an explosion. And when we say honor code, we're not kidding around. This is a world where defending your family's honor is everything. To give you an idea of how serious it was, Vance tells this story about his great-uncle who beat a guy unconscious and then, get this, ran an electric saw up his body, all because the guy insulted his mom. So yeah, this code created these incredibly tight family bonds, but it also fueled just a ton of instability and chaos.
In that chaos, well, it brings us to the next part of his story. Vance is brutally honest about the darker side of this life, and he paints a picture of a childhood that was just constantly unstable.
So forget the idea of a stable two-parent home. For Vance, it was more like a revolving door. His home life was what sociologists call relationship instability. And it wasn't just some abstract concept. I mean, one of the most intense stories he tells is when his mom was speeding down the highway screaming that she was going to kill them both. He literally had to jump out of the car and run for help, which ended up getting her arrested. That was his childhood.
And there's actually a term for this kind of thing. He connects his own experiences to this really powerful concept from sociology called ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And look, these aren't just bad memories. We're talking about really traumatic stuff that can mess with you for your entire life. It basically stacks the deck against you before you've even had a chance to play. And this is the key point. His story, as wild as it sounds, wasn't some one-off thing. The data backs it up. Just look at the numbers here. Kids from working-class backgrounds are way more likely to go through multiple traumas. We're talking 40%. That's a huge number, and it helps create this vicious cycle that's incredibly hard to break out of.
Okay, so with all of that working against him, how did he get out? How did he find an escape route? Well, Vance says it really came down to two major things that gave him a fighting chance. He calls them his lifelines. The first one, his grandparents, Mamaw and Papaw. They were his anchor in all that chaos. The second, the U.S. Marine Corps. That's where he learned a totally new code, a new set of rules, and the kind of discipline he had never, ever had before.
And let's talk about Mamaw for a second. This woman was a force of nature. She was tough, she was foul-mouthed, and she was the absolute center of his world. I mean, this is the same woman who once literally set his drunk grandfather on fire. But she was also the one who made sure he did his homework, who told him he could be whatever he wanted to be. She was the embodiment of that hillbilly spirit, but she aimed it all at protecting him and making sure he had a future.
Then came the Marines, which was like a total immersion into a different universe. For the very first time in his life, he was learning a completely new way to live. We're talking about basic stuff that a lot of us take for granted, like how to manage your money, or even just how to act in a professional setting. It was a crash course that prepared him for a world that was a million miles away from his hometown in Ohio.
So he makes it through the Marines, he gets through college, and he lands at Yale Law School. You'd think he's made it, right?
But what he finds there is a whole new set of rules, a new set of invisible walls he has to climb. He comes face to face with this thing called social capital. Basically, all the unwritten rules of the elite world that nobody ever taught him. Think about it. Going to a fancy networking dinner, knowing which fork to use, or that your shoes are supposed to match your belt. He didn't even know what sparkling water was. It just drove home this huge cultural gap that a fancy degree on its own couldn't fix.
And all of this leads him to a pretty sober conclusion. He basically says, look, there are no easy fixes here. You can't just pass a law to solve these really deep cultural problems. Government policy, he argues, can't fix a broken home. It can't magically give someone a sense of purpose.
So what does work, in his view? It comes down to personal responsibility, for sure, but also people stepping in to help create those escape routes. It's about mentors, it's about providing stability, it's about people like his mama or the mentors he found at Yale who can give you that structure and that social knowledge that you're missing. It's about, like he says, putting a thumb on the scale for the people who are already trying to climb.
Ultimately, Hillbilly Elegy doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but what it does, and what it does so powerfully, is force us to ask this question. By walking us through one man's incredibly difficult, almost impossible, and often painful journey, it makes us wonder, what does it really take to achieve the American dream today?